In this video, I will go over how to prepare a 3D model to be 3D printed. So here I have this example from a student. The rocket that this person made, they have everything prepared on one scene. Usually, to be on the safe side, I kind of have them separately, but in this case, because everything was fine, this printed out really well actually. Normally, something like this right here, this wing would require support because because it prints from the bottom going up, as it prints, it will uh, fall or just break off or just tip over because something like this has nothing below it to support it. If it's just printing something like this, well, it supports itself, so there's no need to build supports. But because these are at an angle or at such an angle, uh, it doesn't require any support. So something like this is fine. But if it was coming out straight across like this, then it would require some supports. Even if um, that applies to this as well, the inside of these, this front part, uh, because it's at such an angle, it also doesn't need any supports. And even if I go to edit, select all, the reason why I do select all is because whenever I mouse over something, because these are separate objects, uh, this 3D printing software, FlashPrint, treats them as separate objects. So if I wanted to, say, print the whole thing, well, I need to select every single individual piece. But it's too much of a hassle, so I could just go to Edit, select all, and then whatever I do, it applies to everything. So if I go to Supports, Auto Support, yes, and down here at the bottom, so if I rotate, I can see that there's no supports. None were created. Well, inside there, but in this case, these are not needed just because um, this structure is a very basic structure and it never fails, so there's no need to have supports. So if you build supports and you get something like this, well, you can just clear them. It's okay. This is okay, especially because the inside, we don't really care what's on the inside. So to save material, to save time, we don't need any supports. But if for some reason errors happen, I would recommend just print one piece at a time. And if you still get errors, then go ahead and use the supports. But in this case, I would not use supports just because these cylinders they're fine for printing as is. I would only worry about these things. But if auto supports, like we just saw, nothing happens, so that's fine. So anyways, what I'm going to do is bring in a different model. So let's say I'm done printing this and I want to start something from scratch. Well, I'm just going to go to File, New Project. I can save it if I want. In this case, I'm not. And let's go to File. Whoops, I want to go to Load. And then in the window, I'm going to go to No Name because that is the SD card, the name of the SD card. So it's a mess right now, but what I'm going to do is I will go to something that was done recently. Maybe I'll go here, and then, choose. Okay, I'll do the Cuphead. So one thing is this X3G file, this is actually the file that's generated from the 3D printer that's going to be used for the 3D printer. I mean, it's the file format created by the software, for the 3D printing software, to be used for the printer. So if I try to open it, here I have this, and here's the actual model that's ready to be 3D printed. This was sliced in half. That way the front part gets printed, and the back part gets printed. Whatever's under here is going to look kind of ugly, but that's not going to be seen because it's just going to be glued from this part, the bottom part, to the other side. But anyways, here I can see that the estimated time, how much material, and I can click and drag on the slider and it shows me how it's going to be printed. So it starts from here and it goes up like this and all that stuff. So it comes out fine. If I click on back, I have nothing, which is kind of weird sometimes, but that's fine. I just wanted to show that part. But when you want to start from scratch and you don't have anything, you just finished modeling something, you want to not bring this in because that's what the file is for the 3D printer. But we want to bring in the STLs or this file, which I've never seen, but this seems to be the file format. Oh, 3MF, that is the file format, the default file format from 3D printer. So even that file works with this. So what I'm going to do is I'll bring one of these instead. I'll bring in, okay, I'll go with this one. So I'm going to open up the 3MF, and here is this. So this is supposed to be the arm for the character. I would rather bring in a file that's much better. Jeez. First of all, these names are... I highly recommend that the kids name their files properly, and by that I mean with their name on it, first name, and then space, and then whatever it is. Adding something like this is just gonna be confusing, and the last thing I want to do is deal with random names that have nothing to do with what it is. So highly emphasize that part, and this kid obviously didn't follow. So let's see. I'll go with this one, whatever this is. Okay, cool. So most of the time you'll get this message, it's off the platform, that's fine. Just click yes, and we get this. Now this is the file. There's the front and then the back. Obviously it's not going to fit inside the 3D printer, so ideally you would want to separate them like this kid did, but I cannot select the model and then delete it because when I click on one, it selects both sides. This and this are separate for some reason, but this is connected to all of these. That's fine, but this is something that you can easily fix in 3D Builder. Just delete everything but leave one object and then save it as a separate object and then do the rest for the other things. But anyways, let's say I was going to use this. Well, what I would do is I would go to Scale with everything selected. I don't have this selected, so I do need to select all. And then go to Scale, click it again, and then you can just click the down arrow or just type in a number, but I prefer to just do like this, that way I can see there. So now this will fit. I can also click it, left click and drag on the outside, whatever works for you. So now that I have that, I can also maximize this, remember the space area, by rotating this. So I'm just going to rotate it this direction, and then if I want, I can go ahead and make this bigger. But one problem that I'm not a fan of is now it reset the values. So obviously this isn't 100% of the original size, but it's just something you have to kind of deal with. Obviously the bigger the model, the more time it's going to take to 3D print. My general rule is if a kid takes 5-10 minutes to model something, I'm not going to print like a 2-hour-long model or a print job for that kid. That's not what I do. That's not how I work when it comes to this. Just because you run the risk of having problems or errors or glitches after an hour of printing, and you have to redo it again, and it's just too much, especially with a large class. But if a kid really does a good job, they took their time, they've always listening, all that stuff, then I don't mind printing something bigger or spending more time with that. But let's say that I was going to print this. So, okay, everything's set. What I got to do, just to make sure, select all. Everything's selected. I'm going to go to extruder. And the 3D printer has two different nozzles. We're using the one on the left. Currently the one on the right is clogged. That's fine. The one on the left is fine anyways. So here these are color coded. So if I select the right one, it's going to change the whole thing to this color. But if I click on the left one, the whole thing changes to this color. Now if I only had, say, this selected, just this piece, and I click on the right, well, now that is going to be printed with this extruder. I don't want that. I want everything to be just from one. So that's what I'll do. The other thing is, let me close this. I'm going to edit, select all, go to supports, and for the most part, I just do auto supports. In this case, there's no need for supports. This is fine. Another thing is, hopefully everything is leveled, everything is on the floor. You can't, I would recommend anything that's floating, you would just fix that from 3D Builder. Those are the simple basic things that kids need to make sure beforehand anyways. But there's always that one kid that doesn't do so, so make sure that's checked beforehand. So everything's ready to be printed. I'm going to go to print, and all you got to do is, because it's on the left one, this is already set to PLA. There's no need to change anything here. All you got to change is this right here for the temperature. If you don't see this, you got to click on more options. I tend to go with 70. Some prefer 90. 70 for me has worked, so that's what I stick with. Another thing you need to do is change this to low for a faster print job. For a character, obviously the higher the better, but if it's going to take 6 hours to print, then that's kind of not a good idea. So I tend to go with low or even standard sometimes, but low is fine. But like I said, it's up to you. If the kid's done a good job, then I guess standard or even high would be fine. But anything higher than 3 hours long, even 2 hours long, is not something that I like to do, so I tend to stick with this. Supports, leave this, if it has supports, if supports are applied, then supports will be printed from the left extruder. The other thing are rafts. Rafts are kind of like rafts will create I believe they print a thin floor for the model to be printed on. I believe that's what that one is. I tend to just leave it at this. If I can do it without it, then I don't. But the big thing about rafts is that it keeps models from moving around while it's printing, which is something that I've had problems with. Maybe 30 minutes or 50 minutes into the print job, the model will just unstick from the floor or from the printer bed and then just move around. So I tend to leave rafts on. If I go over here, these things I just leave it as is. Hexagons, they're good. It's a mix between a very strong interior and a weak interior. So lines would be weak, triangle would be super strong. Hexagons is kind of like a middle ground. So it's it's good enough. But if you just mouse over, it does tell you what it does. Oh, I had it wrong. Hexagon is the highest strength. Okay, well, it's kind of right. I tend to go with hexagon just because it's good and durable. But yeah, this there is no right extruder, so we're not bothering with that. Speed, this is fine. Again, temperature. Oh, one thing. Earlier I changed to 70, but because I changed these resolutions, if I go to high, for example, it goes back to 50 to the default. So you want to make sure that before you type anything, that you first click here and then change it. So that's one thing to watch out for. So pretty much all you got to change is just this to 70. So that's pretty much it. You could say the config, but I don't. I like to do this manually just to make sure. But yeah, then you would just click OK. You would designate the save, the destination to be saved to. So if I go to the root of the SD card, it would be under, it doesn't really matter, but I go to the PLA orange because that's the material, and then these are the different files that I need to clean up or just delete now. But you can always make a new folder if you need to, things like that. Here it is, you know, blah, whatever, and then save it in there. Give it a simple name, you know, kid's name, underscore or just space, whatever you want, and then whatever the model is. And then just click save. It's too long. Okay, yes. So there is a limit to how long the text name could be. So there it is. It is done, and it's going to tell me how long this is going to take. An hour and a half practically. How much material is left. And if I click and drag on the slider, I can see how it's going to come out. Here's those rafts. But yeah, sometimes rafts are helpful, sometimes they're not. It just depends on the model. But yeah, that's how you 3D print stuff.